Hey guys, I am so ridiculously excited about this video today. I've been looking forward to doing this one for a really long time. We are diving deep into a recovery story that will inspire you to see ME/CFS in a new way. And you'll also know what pulled Crystal, a social cognition science PhD student from Arbroath, Scotland, out of it. Crystal got sick almost overnight in December of 2020 and was diagnosed about a year later with ME/CFS. And she will explain why self-advocacy was perhaps the most important part of her recovery, how come pacing is so tricky, and why it matters so much to choose the people in your life carefully, even if it means sometimes starting from scratch. And thankfully for Crystal, as it's the case for so many people, this tough health journey led to incredible things. She is now in the best shape of her life, and also pulled a very brave move and bought a mini camper van and moved into the great outdoors and has just been on an incredible adventure. So welcome to the channel, Crystal. It is so great to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me. Lovely to be here.
So, really excited to get into your story. So, take us back. How did this all start for you?
So yeah, it was almost overnight. I got very sick in December of 2020. Didn't know what was going on. Had all sorts of problems. Was very fatigued overnight. Went to the doctors and they didn't really have any answers for me at all. No one knew what had happened to me. They couldn't tell me what it was. They did some tests. They couldn't find anything, if I'd ever get better. And I was really in the dark with it. But my story gets a little more complicated because I knew there was something wrong with my neck at the time, and they investigated and found a thyroid nodule. So whilst I was unwell and dealing with what turned out to be CFS, they also did a biopsy and couldn't conclude whether it was cancer or not from the biopsy. So told me I was going to have major surgery to take 2/3 of my thyroid out. And then a little further down the line, I found out I've got a couple of autoimmune conditions now as well. So I have celiac disease and Hashimoto's, which is killing off the third of a thyroid I still have left. So I wasn't just dealing with one thing. It was a very muddled, mixed picture where there was not a lot of answers and a lot of stress. And I eventually found a private doctor who was the one that diagnosed me. But it took me a long time to first see him. So I actually didn't see him until I think it was September of 2021. And that's when I finally got some answers. But all up until that point, through the scare with cancer, the surgery, everything, no one could tell me what was wrong with me or if I'd ever get better.
What was that like? What were you thinking going through all of that?
It was by far the hardest period of my life. I think the worst thing is when people maybe don't believe you, and I mean like medical professionals who you go to for help. You sort of grow up naively thinking in life, you get sick, you go to a doctor, they know what's wrong with you, you get better. And it's a very neat journey. And this was the first time I'd ever come across something that wasn't like that. And you're scared enough, right, when you're sick, when you're unwell, and then to have people either not know what's wrong with you or not believe there's anything wrong with you, it's just 10 times worse. You just somehow don't know where to turn.
And then when you finally got that ME/CFS diagnosis, what did that mean to you?
First of all, the first appointment with my private doctor to be listened to was an unreal moment. I remember just sitting thinking, when I was speaking and explaining my symptoms and what was wrong, he just kept nodding and making notes. He didn't question me. He didn't start to tell me I couldn't possibly be feeling this or doing that, and he just listened and took it all in. And it was the moment he said to me, "Don't worry, I know what's wrong with you, and I promise you can get better from this." That was such a magical moment. I just burst into tears. And this was during the pandemic, so this was over a video call. This specialist was in London, and I'd basically begged for an appointment for months. But it meant I had somewhere to start from. Yes, I was really sick and unwell, but there was an answer and someone believed in me, sort of thing. That was huge.
And that is not a message that most people I talk to get from their doctors, that don't worry, you're going to be okay, you're going to get better. So what was he basing that on, or what did he recommend for you to do?
Like I say, he was a well-known specialist throughout the whole of the UK, and I'd done massive amounts of research to try and find this gentleman, this human being, this doctor. And he did, to begin with, say he doesn't have all the answers. It'll be a very, very long journey. There'll be setbacks, there'll be relapses. But it was more just because I think he'd been doing it about 20 years, and he'd said, look, I've seen this before and I've seen people get better. And it's the hope that I needed to cling on to, if that makes sense. When before that you're constantly told you might never get better, we don't know what this is, nothing, and someone just gives you that little boost of, no, don't worry, I've seen this before in people, and this is why what you're doing with your channel is so great. I've seen this, people can get better, they do get better, and I believe you will get better. It was just a game changer for me.
So I know a lot of people, or I imagine a lot of people watching in that area, are going to be very curious to know who this doctor was. So who was it that you saw?
This was Dr. Jenkins, based in London. I can't remember his clinic name, but I can provide you with that. The way I found him initially was there was a podcast. I'd have to find the episode as well, and it was about CFS, and it was him speaking. And as soon as I heard him speak, I thought, I need to speak to this man. This is who I need to talk to. And that's how I found him. Okay, we will get all of those links and have them in the video description for people who are watching, because it sounds like he's doing incredible work. There's it's a completely different experience than the overwhelming majority of people have when they go to see their doctor. What a game changer to hear that message when you get your diagnosis. So where did you start from, or where did you go from there? I think to begin with, for me, it was accepting that this was a long journey and not to rush things. I think as well, so throughout the process when people didn't know what was wrong with me, I'd started to do my own research in that I'd done some private blood tests, and I'd found vitamin deficiencies, and I'd found little pieces of the puzzle. I'd found my thyroid autoimmunity, and I realised that this was going to be a journey where there was lots of different things I'd have to do. And for me personally, there wasn't one thing that I would change or try that was going to make me better. It was just chipping away at the little wins, the little things I could improve. If I'm deficient in vitamin D, okay, let's sort that out. If there's, every little step I could make to see progress was what I realised I was in for. And again, that kind of made it better because I was never going to get better overnight, and I knew that it was going to be just little wins and little things, and that helped me.
Were there some things you tried that weren't helpful for you?
I'm trying to think back. I tried, probably like everyone, I tried every single thing I came across. And it maybe wouldn't be that it wouldn't help, because it was all healthy lifestyle choices, right? Like eating better,
Right.
looking after your sleep, not drinking alcohol, like all the things we know we should be doing in life anyway. Simple things for me.
Yeah.
A big one was how I dealt with stress, but I would maybe get frustrated when I wouldn't take on leaps and bounds of improvement. But I don't think there was anything that wasn't a good decision to make. It was just more that maybe it was less of an influence on my illness than other factors, and it was finding out which ones had the most weight and which ones I could see the most improvement with.
Yeah, that's such a good way to look at it. And you're right. And it's tough to tease out, because I talk about all the things that helped me to recover. And, in my book, I laid out all of these changes that I made that I believed at the time were vital for my CFS recovery. But in retrospect, I think they were all vital health changes to make. Which ones directly, dealt with the CFS component of it, I don't know. I'd imagine there's just a sort of synergistic thing that's happening. And it's all learning experiences. The only thing, I don't really have any regrets aside from all the money I spent. I don't think recovery needed to be anywhere near as expensive as it was. But yeah, it's all learning for sure. So what were some of the things that were showing you those incremental improvements and helping you? Definitely
for me, how I dealt with stress was a massive one. When I got sick, I realised was the most stressful time of my entire life, and it wasn't. I don't think it was coincidence that that's when CFS happened to me. It was a viral trigger that I had, but loads of things just fell apart because I was under so much stress. And I realised that life is stressful. That's not going to change. What's going to have to change is how I cope with stress, how I deal with stress, how I manage it. That was massive. And obviously I found out I had celiac disease much later on, but diet and lifestyle was huge for me. Seeing your body now as something to cherish and look after and invest in, sleep as well, it's all the same thing. So I think, diet for me and stress management very big things. And that seems super simple, but there's such a massive influence on how you feel and your physical and mental health that they were really important.
Yeah, it sounds simple, just diet and stress, but it's probably the two biggest things that the people on the planet are trying to figure out how to deal with in life. So for diet, and that's I believe very individual for people, but what sort of diet changes helped you?
Well, I'd figured out that gluten wasn't good for me at all. But I just think eating less processed foods anyway, just eating, making more things from scratch. Again, doing really simple things that we all know we should be doing. Yeah, eating whole foods. I'd say try things, because for me it was gluten, but it might be dairy for someone else. I tried like no dairy. I tried lots of different variations of diets over periods of time, like did an elimination diet and figured out what it was for me that was causing issues, and then tailoring it to that. But again, just doing the things that we all know we should be, and eating well, whole foods, lovely things, varied diet, vegetables, fruit. That was it.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I hear over and over again. It isn't, or it's rarely, I needed to be keto or vegan or paleo or any of those things. It's just getting back to natural, real food and figuring out which ones might be problematic for you that you might be reacting to. And I think that's just a really important thing to talk about, because so many people are putting so much pressure on themselves trying to fit into these really strict, rigid diets that someone else has created guides for. And then I think that just makes you more sick. And if it's I always think, if it's such a hard diet for you to follow, is this really the diet that's for you? Because how you're eating should feel good and shouldn't be eat nothing but kale. Like, if it's really stressful for you to do this diet, it's probably not a good fit.
I think as well, I don't know about you, but going through chronic fatigue, I became very aware of what was good and not good for my body. Like, your body talks to you and it lets you know if it's not happy with what you're doing. And I think just listening to that with many different aspects of your life will guide you, like you say, on your specific journey, rather than fitting into a certain box or a certain diet that you think you must follow. Just be very attuned to how your body reacts to different things.
Yeah, I used to think that symptoms were just random and just sort of happening in my body, mostly without reason, and especially with CFS, because you can get so many different symptoms that are unpredictable and inconsistent, but they all have a purpose. So really paying attention to that, what brought it on? Was there something stressful immediately before this, or was it something that you ate? I'm kind of just sitting back and being a bit of a detective, not being judgy or hard on yourself or I shouldn't have done that, but just it's empowering, because then you realize you have more control over this than you realize, and you're not just like this bag blowing in the wind at the whim of all these random symptoms that are happening. But every symptom is like a learning opportunity to get a better understanding of what's happening.
Probably doesn't hurt that I'm a researcher, like, as a job. So, figuring out little variables and little pieces to a puzzle is kind of, my mindset anyway. So I was my own research project for a good while, trying to put everything together.
Yeah, that's a good background to have. I was a social worker. I'm not sure how that helped me then. I think it helps me now do this, but and you had mentioned stress as well, and that's another thing we say kind of lightly, like, okay, I needed to get my stress under control, but wow, is that a tough one? So for you, right, I need to start dealing with it better. What were some of the things that you did to start managing your stress?
As hard as it was, the first sort of major decision I had to make was that I knew there were certain individuals in my life that brought a lot of stress into my life, and I think making hard decisions about the influences around you as well as how you deal with it, for me, was step number one, and that was very difficult. And then I think it's just putting things into perspective, and in a way I think chronic fatigue helps me do that as well. The little things don't seem that important anymore, when you've dealt with massive things and gone through such a hard time. Yeah, it's just like water off a duck's back. It's been a lot more calm, and I'm very lucky that as soon as I started to be able to exercise again, I could manage stress, because before I got sick, exercise was my go-to. I'm stressed, I'm going to go run. I'm stressed, I'm going to go work out. That was what I did. And when that's taken away, it's then when you realise, well, how else am I going to cope with stress? Because I can't go and run. I can't go and let it out, in an energetic way. So just finding things that relax you, finding really good people to surround yourself with, and evaluating when every little thing comes up, is it really that important?
Yeah, I read somewhere they say just to dial down the importance of things. And it sounds almost too simple, but in the moment, think about it. And it's like on a scale of 1 to 10. And in your mind right now, you've got it as a 9. Like just imagine moving that needle down to a 2. And you think, well, that's too simple. I can't just do that. But really just think about what are the worst case things about this situation? How bad is it really? And just tell yourself this isn't that important. And it really, our mindset and the words we use and the thoughts we think are really powerful. So yeah, I think that's a really good one. All right, so you've mentioned a few changes, tweaks, things that you were doing along the way. Were there any other things that you did that contributed to your recovery?
I'm trying to think. It was honestly for me lots of simple little basic things. I'm trying to think of other examples I can give you. I'm trying to think of my doctor. Another thing for me was not to push things too hard, too quickly. So pacing was a big one. And any of this stuff that I'm talking about was just do little changes, little bit by little bit, especially when I was getting back into exercise. So I'm sort of from a military family and I played sport at quite a high level when I was young. So it was always, if things get hard, you just push through. You're just going to push through and it'll be fine. And this was a massive lesson for me to learn, where it was, you have to stop before you get to the barrier of things getting hard and just take it easy. And then the next time do a little more and do a little more. And stopping physical exercise before you feel tired was such a bizarre experience to begin with. And I fell foul of that many times where I'd push too hard, think I'd got away with it. And for me, it was always a delayed reaction. So it'd be the next day, I'd be like, I'm in trouble. And I'd really set myself back. So that was a massive one, just for me personally, for the type of person that I am. And the way I would always, again, deal with things in the past was just, go harder, try harder. There is no relaxing. Yeah. And I think being kind to yourself because of things like that. So there's this narrative we have in life that if we're not out there doing this, doing that, and do the other, we're lazy. And it's about rest. It's about getting, okay, I've done enough for today. I'm going to take it easy the rest of the day, and being okay with that and being comfortable with it and knowing that that's what your body needs. Again, listening, your body's telling you when it's too much, when I've had enough, and just being very attuned to that.
You talked too before, when we were chatting before this interview, about self-advocacy being really important and not giving up. So what role did that play for you in all of this?
I wouldn't have got where I am today if I hadn't been extremely strong with self-advocacy. And it's unfortunate that we have to go through that, but I do think it's so important for people to understand, especially when I was sick, it was in the pandemic, so I couldn't even have anyone with me in doctor's appointments, or some of the doctor's appointments that I had with the National Health Service over here were on the phone, and I was always alone. And it's down to you. There is no one else that's going to speak up. And it's extremely difficult when you have medical professionals saying one thing and you have to say, no, that's not my experience, that's not what's happening. But I honestly don't think you'll get as far if you can't find that in you. And I know it's so hard, but you just can't give up. That's the thing, you cannot give up. And I've sat in tears. I've had days where I've just had to, say today, it's enough today and we'll start again tomorrow. But it's that picking yourself up again the next day and going, right, no one else is going to fix this but me. And just believe in yourself. Like, what you're capable deep down, and I hope people get from this that they will get better one day. And it's just believing that and keeping on and keeping on and keeping on and not giving up.
What were some of the things that helped you to hold on to that hope and that not giving up?
My mum.
Because it's tough.
Like, I don't know. I had it in my mind when I got very sick from day one, even if this was completely naive at the time, that I would not accept that I would never get better. I never, ever entertained that. And it was probably a defense thing where if I'd have opened myself up to that possibility, I don't know how I'd have coped mentally with it. So I just had this drive inside of me that it was like, no, one day, and I didn't know how far in the future it would be, and I didn't know when I'd get there, but I thought, one day I will get there. And I had this ridiculous vision in my head of myself up it's a Scottish mountain called the Munro, which I love to go up. And I was like, if I can be on one Munro in the future, and I had this mental image of myself atop this mountain, someday, that was it. And like I say, having my mum, without my mum, I'd be absolutely lost.
Yeah, when you refuse to accept any other future for yourself than recovery, then you have no choice to pick yourself up and keep going every day, no matter how hard it is. And it doesn't mean that, you're like cheery and hopeful all the time, but it's like, I keep going, even though it's unpleasant, accepting that this is where I am right now and it's not fun. But yeah, there is no plan B. So we just keep going. I think every interview I do, this is a message that people say. And I always think it's the most important part of recovery. It's the base of it, not giving up. I think it's success with anything, because everything in life is hard. So yeah, I think that's an important thing for sure. So you had mentioned earlier in our discussion just now that, there was a virus that first set this off, but looking back, you think there were probably more things that contributed to it. So how important was it for you on this journey to figure out what those things were that might have contributed to getting this condition?
I think very important, but I think it takes time to gain that perspective and be able to look back. I don't know about other people. At the time when I first got sick, I didn't know instantly why or what was happening. And then it's when you sit and think later and you go, okay, that could have been better. I could have done that better, or this was happening. Unfortunately, it was a very stressful time for everyone. The worldwide pandemic was happening. Of course, that was an influence in my life. But there was silly things. I'd lived without heating and hot water for 8 months. My boiler had broken and I couldn't pay to fix it. And I was saving money for a new boiler. So I was literally like boiling a kettle to wash my hair. And yeah, so that wasn't great. And because I was saving money, I wasn't eating well, because I was trying to save as much as I can. So I wasn't looking after myself with my diet. I know I keep talking about what you put in your body, but it's super important to me anyway. And yeah, just things like a stressful relationship, and looking back and recognizing if there are things in your life which aren't the best. Everyone has stresses and strains, but if you can evaluate and look at it and go, actually, I could change it for the better. I think just recognizing those things and taking the time to just look at your own life and your own approach to life, rather than trying to find answers outside of it, and being a bit more introspective, for me was very, very helpful. And it's also mistakes I'll never make again. As hard as CFS is, it's a huge learning journey. And I'm personally not the same human being I was, and I don't think I ever will be. And I'm very, very glad for that. This will change everyone for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, you've talked about even appreciating having gone through this, which I know from experience is not a tough thing to realize or admit. So what makes you grateful for all the hell you've been through?
Something in my life was going to give. Like I was saying, I was in such a stressful place that something was going to give. And I've been fortunate enough that I've clawed my way back from that. And as I've said, I'm not the same human being now. And I do deal with things differently. Oh, I have such wonderful people in my life, and I would never, ever have met these people had I not got sick. And there are opportunities I've had, and there are things I'm doing now that I didn't do before, I could never do before. It sounds so bizarre. And again, if you're in the thick of it, you will not understand this probably at all. You'll be like, how could you be grateful? But it was the sort of jolt in my life that I needed to take me on a different trajectory. And the trajectory I'm on now is absolutely incredible. So yeah, in a weird way, I'm thankful that it happened.
Yeah, it forces you to make a lot of changes often. And without something really forcing you, change can feel impossible. Because when we're our lives, we think, oh, there's no way I can quit this job, even though it makes me miserable. There's no way I can leave this relationship. There's like all of these things feel like you have no control over them. But if it was a friend of ours or a child, we're from the outside, we'd be like, is that really true? Like, let's explore this. You might be able to find another job that could be better, or maybe you actually can leave this relationship if it's not doing well. But once you get really sick, it forces you to do a lot of things, make a lot of changes. And when you do these changes, you put yourself in new environments that have the people around you that you want to be like. Like, I remember thinking I had nothing in common with my friends anymore. They just wanted to go out and drink and do whatever. So I kind of got down to 0 friends. But then without even trying, just from the new things I was doing, I started making friends with people who want to meditate or go to a yoga class or, go for a hike. So yeah, it really can transform your life. It's horrible that we have to go through such hell for that to happen, but I'm glad to hear that for you, like so many people, it's had a ton of silver linings.
I think all this fighting and self-advocacy as well that you have to do for yourself gives you a bit of confidence. And then when you are, like you say, maybe getting into new situations, you're happier to put yourself out there. And there's also this thing of, we've all had our health taken away, right? So we've all experienced, or we all know that not to take our lives or health for granted. So I live my life to the fullest now, because I didn't see getting sick the first time coming at all. So you never know what's around the corner. So I live for today and make the most of absolutely every opportunity. And I wasn't like that before.
And it's, yeah, the confidence, and it's empowering. And I think of it like I used to be driving around in a car that I had no idea how it worked. And if it broke down on the side of the road, I was screwed. There was nothing I could do. But now if it does, I know that I either have the tools to fix it or the ability to figure it out, which is nice. It's not feeling like, because I think we also think about a lot of illnesses as just coming out of nowhere and we have no control over it. And I know with genetics, and there are some cases we can't control everything, but we have a lot more power to prevent things or to treat things than we realize, which is an amazing thing to know as you go through the rest of your life.
I think as well, I recognize if I'm getting into unhealthy habits again, like if I don't take as good care of my diet, and I'll notice things and address that before it gets into danger areas where I think this is going to go south. I think you want to prioritize your health more after, and keep on top of things and make sure you're doing the best that you can.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to point out that it's not like a perfect smooth journey, and we don't suddenly never make a mistake again or never not take care of ourselves again, but it's just a general, going the right direction and doing the best that we can. Because I used to think that I would just be perfect after I got better and I'd learned all my lessons and I would never make any of those mistakes again, and I make less of them, but sadly I am not yet perfect.
No, it's just to say that's the thing about the less, yeah, we're all human, but that's what I mean. If I catch myself having some cake, I'll maybe stop at a slice rather than like have the whole thing. Or, silly things, but.
Yeah, I totally hear you. So what does your life look like now compared to before you got sick? Because you've got some really cool things that you're doing now.
So I always enjoyed the outdoors. And this is another thing about recovery for me personally, is that as soon as I was well enough to be outside again, that helped massively with my recovery, because I love it. And I think there's just something about being in nature which heals us all. And the first little baby step was, even when I couldn't, go running or hiking or anything like I used to, I'd gotten into photography a little bit, and I was being outside taking some photos, and it was a nice way to be in nature. So I was always outdoorsy before. I loved getting back to it, but I've taken it to like a whole different level now. I hike a lot, I run a lot, I've run ultramarathons now, and I'd never done that before, ever. I think it's me sort of testing what my body can do and enjoying the fact that it can push itself to these extremes. Like you say, I've met lots of other amazing like-minded people, so I spend my time doing the things I love with people that are amazing, and I'm just absolutely loving life.
And I mentioned the camper van at the beginning, so I think we need to explain a little bit about that.
That is something I would never have done before. So obviously my relationship broke down and I was on my own, and I'm a student, I don't have the biggest budget, and I thought, what is the way I can explore, or the most budget friendly way I can explore? And I put on a credit card, if I'm honest. I just went and bought this little vehicle, kitted it out with my dad in the back. We turned it into a camper van ourselves, and that was it. I was away exploring Scotland. I spent last weekend in it in like -6 temperatures. It's called Bluebell. It's like my best friend.
Oh, that is so incredible. So how do you go out for weeks at a time in this thing? What does that look like?
I think the longest I've done was a recent trip with my friend. We did about 5 nights in it. It's normally because I have to work as well. It's normally weekends and a few long weekends where I can get them in. So for people watching, what would you want the main takeaway message from all of this to be? I think absolutely for me, it's not to give up hope. And I know, depending on where you're watching this just now and how you feel and what part of this journey you're on, that can be a really, really difficult thing to do. And I was very close to it myself a couple of times. But you really must just keep up hope and believing that you will get there. It is possible. There are lots of people out there on this channel and other places showing you it's possible. And I honestly believe that's the most important part.
Yeah, I get messages all the time from so many people that have no interest in doing a recovery interview, which I get, but just telling me, like, I'm watching your channel, I learned so many things, I've just recovered after 35 years of being sick, or 25 years of being sick. And it's just, you think it could make a pretty solid argument why you can give up after 30 years. But there's people that have been sick, many people for decades, that do fully recover. So I think that's a really great message. And you have such a great Instagram account. Put it on the screen, link it in the video description, check it out. Because you said you started that just to provide hope and show people, that there is life still there and recovery is possible. And hope the people watching will check it out. Well, thank you to all of you who are watching. As always, can't wait to see your comments on this video, and also want to send a big hug and special shout out to our channel member who joined, Joseph Ashwell. Joseph, thank you so much for supporting the channel. I appreciate you and hope that you are doing well. And to all of you watching, as always, massive hugs to you. You have totally got this. Thank you, Crystal. This was amazing. I so appreciate you and you taking the time to share this today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And for those of you watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that you got something out of it, and I hope to see you in this next one.